Hi everybody, it's Hank Zona, the Grapes Unwrapped. We're back at Beneduce Vineyards with Mike Beneduce. Mike, how you been?
Good, how are you?
Good, good. So this is our continuation of a year in a vineyard and a year at a winery. What are we going to talk about today? Here we are in June, even though we're kind of a little bundled up today. It's high 50 degrees.
Right.
It's the season hasn't quite gotten off the ground yet. But it's getting
still
there.
early in the day. It'll be nice today, I think. Sun's peeking out.
Yeah, but it's a lot greener.
Yes, yeah, a little different than last time you guys were here.
Sticks when we were here last time.
Exactly, right.
So things do change, and they'll start to change really rapidly now
Yes.
too, won't they?
Yeah, these vines at this point are growing about an inch a day, and you can see they're just kind of climbing towards the sky. So what we're going to do today is a little bit of canopy management. We're going to start kind of tucking these guys in and get some wires up, and then we'll talk about leaf pulling, something we do to kind of expose them to air and sunlight. We got to take a tissue sample so we can make sure the vines have all the nutrients they need. And then I wanted to pay a visit to our new Riesling block. Cool. Because last time we were here, we were just about to plant that. Now it's planted, so we can kind of see the final steps of that.
These are
Pinot Noir.
Yep.
So these are 8-year-old vines. Vines, like again, are like perennials. They come back every year, like an oak tree. Last time we were here, we were pruning them, and so now these are kind of going crazy, growing rapidly, and it's just a mad rush to keep on top of everything this time of year.
So they're almost getting ready to flower.
Yeah, this is actually a cool time of year to be here because we only have about a week of flowering every year, and you guys are here for it. So we'll get some close-ups hopefully on what these grape blooms look like, but it's a really kind of exciting time in the vineyard for us. This is basically the start of the fruit development. So once it flowers, it sets fruit. If you come back in a week or two, these would be little grapes. Oh. And then that's kind of the start of our
grapes. Yeah. And actually the weather, the way it's been, has been pretty good for this then, right? Hasn't it?
Yeah, we've had a good week of sun. It's really important to have sun around flowering. So we had a little rain yesterday, which is okay, but looks like a sunny week ahead. So you get better fruit set when there's sun during this time. So we're looking pretty good this week.
So here's a question. I know you harvest your grapes at different times because the grapes become ripe at different times and they develop differently. Do they flower at different times too?
Sure. So yeah, they're staggered. So Pinot Noir is generally a pretty early blossoming vine. It's also our earliest grape that we harvest. We pick Pinot Noir before everything else.
Gotcha.
But you'll see as we move through the vineyard, some of them are a little bit further behind and some are actually a little bit ahead.
So it really does. The beginning and the end really matters significantly.
Yeah, I'd say everything blooms within probably 2 weeks, but our harvest spans 2 months.
Gotcha.
So some grapes just take longer time to ripen.
Right. And the fruit development is different with the seasons, and we'll probably learn that as we go along this year too. But I often wondered if it was really had any impact too, if they start off differently, and they do.
They do.
Cool.
Absolutely.
So let's go hit one of these rows and see what's happening.
All right, let's check it out. Started from the bottom of this block on Friday. You can see my guys are down at the ends of the rows now.
Yeah.
Louis getting a good stretch in after the weekend.
Louis at every row.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to start here. So you could see the ends of those rows were really nice and tucked up and kind of straight. And you can see this row looks like a little bit of a wild mess right now.
Right.
So as these plants grow, they are vines, so they generally want to grow up. They're in nature they grow up trees. Right. So we have to kind of give them something to grab onto. And if you look, it's kind of cool.
So the tendrils are already kind of latching on.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing how they find a wire and they grab it and they literally pull themselves up. Yeah. But what we want to do is just make sure that everything's kind of inside this set of wires that we do. So we'll typically have one person on this side of the row, one person on the other side, and we'll just do it with what's called tucking. So the
tendrils have already started their work. They're clamping on.
Yeah, they're like the arms of the vine. So you can see this guy just naturally put a tendril out. Yeah. And he found the wire, and then it wraps around the wire, and that's basically just allowing this shoot to pull itself up. So again, in nature, that would be wrapped around a tree or something else.
Right. I see it with the different vines that I'm growing in my own garden. So what you're doing is you're guiding them.
Exactly.
They're in their early stages in life. Yeah. And you're parenting them, you're guiding them, and how do you guide them in order to grow properly?
Yeah, basically we have this system of wires that we do. So they all start down. As they grow, we pick these wires up and create these little kind of channels. And then throughout the growing season, we're just doing what's called tucking. So we would be taking shoots like this and sort of just guiding them in between these wires.
tucking is not a fancy French phrase. It's literally,
I don't know what the French translation is for that.
You're just tucking.
Right.
And basically, like I said, you're giving them the direction, and they're taking.
Exactly. Yeah, we're just getting everything in between these channels
themselves, and they'll start to. These tendrils will start to almost sometimes immediately. Really
I mean, within a couple days, you'll see like this guy will wrap around here, and then so then they really do just pull themselves up. You just want to make sure that they're in the right channel, because if they start to grow out into the row like this, maybe we hit it with the tractor, or it starts to go onto the ground. So we want to basically just get everything in between these two channels, and then we come back once we're done tucking everything. And we have a little clip, and we clip these wires together, and so this kind of like holds all the shoots in here like that, and you're basically just getting an upright growth. So probably within another 2 weeks, these guys will be at the top wire. We'll come back and do the same thing with the top wire, and then vines have what they call indeterminate growth, like tomato plants. They'll just continue to keep growing.
Right, depending on the conditions, right?
Right, so we only have a certain height of the canopy here, so once these vines get up past this, we'll actually come by and hedge the top of them.
Okay.
So we just have like a big, it looks like a big chainsaw, but it's a hedge clipper, and we just go down and hedge the top of them. We might have to do that 2 or 3 times throughout the season, because they'll just keep growing. But the idea is that basically from here to here, we have leaves, and so those are just like a big solar panel all the way down. You don't want it to be too jumbled up in here, because otherwise the leaves start to shade each other. So like this leaf on the outside facing the sun is absorbing 100% of the sun's energy. If there's one leaf in front of it, it's being shaded, this one is only absorbing 10% of the sun's energy.
Interesting.
So this leaf is actually using more energy than it's producing.
Gotcha.
So we want to basically have 1 or 2 leaf layers throughout the whole canopy. So that's what we make it nice and thin.
Reason for, I mean, it's all done by hand.
Right.
It's labor intensive.
Yes.
It's, one of the things that has always struck me about your vineyard is it's planned, it's managed, it's organized, it's neat, it's clean. A lot of people are doing seat of the pants, but, that's nice, but you're not maximizing the quality or potential, are you?
Sure. I mean, it's a long-term investment. It's not the kind of thing where you're planting corn and it's done in a year, and then you decide what to plant the next year. Yeah. These vines are 8 years old. We have some that are 10 years old, and if you take care of them this year, they're going to look better next year, and so it's kind of it's a long-term investment for us.
Right. Just like when we talked in the last video, your whole plan, and we're going to go over and look at what's been done since then. When you were planting the new rootstock, you're thinking 10 years out. You're not thinking not thinking, gee, let's go plant something.
No, exactly.
So cool. Where to next?
Let's do some leaf pulling, and I'll show you guys what kind of our next step is.
I could probably do leaf pulling.
You can do some leaf pulling. I'll show you that. Let's head down here.
So as a kid, when we were taking family pictures, my mother would always, position me in front of the rose bush or whatever plant was flowering, because it looked really, nice perspective. But we're not here posing in front of the flowers. This is an important thing. It's not just to look nice when the people come to visit.
Yeah, no, I mean,
this is your canary in the coal mine.
That's exactly what it is. So yeah, back in the old days, in Italy and France and in Europe, they used to plant roses in the vineyard as, like you said, a canary in the coal mine. So anybody that's grown roses knows that they're really sensitive to mildews, powdery mildew especially. Yeah. So grapes get powdery mildew as well, but roses almost always get it first. Right. So vignerons or grape growers used to plant roses in the vineyards as kind of a scout. So when they would see powdery mildew up here on the leaves of the rose, they would know to go out and spray a crop protectant in the vineyard. And then they need to if the mildew wasn't present. Exactly. So it sort of helps you to intervene only when you need to. Exactly. And these look great. I mean, even though it's been kind of a wet season, it's it's been, and they do look nice. But again, it's and these will flower all year long, all season long, I should say. Yep. And it's kind of a little homage to my ancestors as well. In Italy, we're rose growers. Yeah. And then when they came over to the States, they moved into Madison, which was known as the Rose City. And so they actually grew roses and drove them into New York City to the farm markets and stuff, and that's kind of how my ancestors coming over here got into agriculture. So it's a little bit of both for us. Yeah. Now we also have these kind of complex weather model systems that are calculating relative humidity and temperature and saying, powdery mildew is sporulating today, and so we're using both. We're using technology, and we're also using the old school way of doing it, and so it's kind of nice to have both. Well, we were talking on one of the other rows. One of the things that you do here, I do in my tomato garden, because I've learned that from my father and my father-in-law, who learned it from their fathers from Italy, who were growing tomatoes and growing roses as well too. Sure. And it's it's kind of old school, but there's
there's a reason behind that
no
as
need
well
to reinvent
too.
the wheel.
So no, but yet at the same time, there's so much that's available to you
absolutely.
that helps you to get your job done.
We've come so far really in the last 100 years in grape growing, and I always tell people there's no reason to accept technology in every other part of your life and then for some reason think that farming can't benefit from that, right? You have to be able to pick and choose.
It's technology and touch.
Technology
you have to have the touch, you have to have the experience of being out here, and you are out here daily.
Yes.
And then technology becomes a great aid to you at the same time. So it's, and maybe a lot of times it's reinforcement, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. Let's go see what's been done already.
Cool.
So this row's been completed already?
Yes, so we did these on Friday. So you can see, you look down, they're kind of nice and sandwiched in between there.
Nothing's poking out.
Right, everything's pinched in, the wires are pinched in here, so we're gripping that really nice and tight. And in about another 2 weeks, these will be up at the top wire. We'll come back and do the same thing at the top wire, and then we'll start hedging, like I was talking about. But probably in another week or so, we're gonna have to come through and start doing what we call leaf pulling. Just exactly what it sounds like. We're pulling leaves. So the way we prune these, we were talking about.
That's not the French phrase.
Yeah. we were talking about in the winter when we prune these. The reason we prune them the way we do is because all the fruit is in the same zone. So we have what's called a fruiting zone. So if you look down here, right now all the flowers, are like in the first 6 inches of growth, and then it's all leaves from there up.
Yep.
So this is again a really cool time of year to be here because this is the flower blooming.
Yeah.
So grapes are self-pollinating. They have male and female parts. So we don't need to have like bees or anything to pollinate, but the grapes themselves pollinate each cluster. Each of these flowers will flower and turn into a berry, basically.
Wow. So I can see that they're already forming here, right?
Yeah, so actually these haven't opened up yet.
Okay.
And you can see these have just opened up yet. And so what we want to do at this time of year is we want to start to be able to get some direct sunlight and some wind on these clusters.
Okay.
Because that removes the humidity from them, basically.
Gotcha.
We're basically manipulating the microclimate just where the grapes are.
Right.
So we'll literally come through here and start pulling leaves.
To expose them.
And right. So you can see basically just opening up that part of the canopy.
Yep. And you're leaving the leaves right there as organic matter.
Yep. Oh yeah, we want these to go back into the soil.
Yep.
No reason to pull them out. And so we're basically just increasing air circulation so that,
as I say, you're airing it out.
Yep.
You're opening them up, giving them the good stuff.
And so when you get some, morning dew like this, the grapes dry out a lot quicker when you have that. You're also getting direct sunlight on them. So when these set fruit, you're going to start to have some direct sunlight on the fruit. And so that actually changes the flavor components in the vine. We call it farming for flavor.
Makes them happy.
Yep, makes them happy, helps them ripen a little quicker.
Yeah.
Warms them up a little bit. So all those things really make a big difference. And so this is a really time-consuming, labor-intensive job. There are machines that do this, but they don't do it as well as human hands.
Right, because they're pulling everything off. And
right.
You're probably losing good.
Yeah, you're gonna hit some flowers, you're gonna bruise some stuff.
Yep.
But we'll basically go through, we do this typically on the east side of the vine first to get some morning sun on it. And it's kind of like acclimating them to the sunlight. And then after a couple weeks, we'll come back and clean up the west side. And so we're literally gonna have fully exposed clusters by the time those set fruit. You'll see it's really nice and open here, and then this will all be a full canopy.
You're keeping it in this zone for a few reasons, right? Obviously, it's easier to harvest.
Easier to harvest, right?
So and everything's done by hand, so that's quicker, especially once everything's ready to pick, right? You don't want to hang in there too long. But it also, is this giving it the maximum or the best exposure to the elements?
Yeah,
by keeping it at that
you can
level?
imagine if we didn't have, if there were grape clusters all up and down here, how would you do something like leaf pulling? You'd be like pulling this leaf and that leaf.
And I would think that you get more consistency then in your fruit and your growing and the ripeness when you do it that way.
Yeah, because your whole fruiting zone is basically naked at that point, and so you have the wind can come right through here. And that's one of the really cool parts about our site is that it's really open, and we're the second highest place in our county. So we're on the top of this little knoll here, and we almost have a constant wind during the day, and so the stuff really just dries out here. So it's definitely a good site for grapes.
Looking ahead later in the season, do you have to continue to manage the canopy, or because there might be certain conditions where you're gonna have to keep pulling more leaves, right?
Yeah,
if you're not getting enough heat and sun, maybe?
It could be, yeah. We always manage that block by block. It's not like we do the same thing every block. So something like Pinot Noir, I'm going to pull a little bit less leaves than I would, say, Cabernet Franc. That really needs hot, direct sunlight.
Gotcha.
And so as we get more experience with each of these different vines, we're sort of tweaking our techniques in each block, and it's cool because it makes it exciting for me. I'm not just going out and doing the same thing.
Right.
I'm listening to the vine, I'm listening to the wines that they produce, so you get this kind of full feedback loop, and then sort of tweaking our ideas every year.
And the professional challenge of New Jersey is that the seasons are never going to be consistent.
Sure.
So you're pulling or not pulling at different times of the year or not as well, because it's, you never know what the weather's going to be like.
Changes with the weather, changes with a lot of things. We might get a week of rain, and it's tough to work out here in the rain, so then we're really behind. So we have a lot of challenges here, but we're working through them. We're having
and there are wine regions, of course, that are so remarkably consistent that they can do the same thing every year.
They can,
even though the way the world is these days, it's even those consistent areas aren't quite as consistent as they used to be in some cases.
If you don't believe in climate change, you're not a farmer. So
exactly, that's what I like to say. It's not a political conversation.
It's real.
It's an agricultural conversation.
Right. I mean, and we were, I was just traveling to Greece and Sicily, and growers in both places, one of their first comments was things are changing. The climate change.
And again, that's what made me think of that, is that those were places that were remarkably consistent year to year in their weather, and they're not anymore. They're really not.
Yeah, and they've been growing varieties there for 1,000 years, the same varieties, and now the wine style is changing so rapidly in the last 10 years because things are getting warmer. So everybody's adapting. It's not just grape growers either. That's farmers all over the world. They're adapting, and that's luckily they're pretty ingenious. All right, so you're up. Your turn.
All right, so you're going to teach me how to pull these. And like I said, I pull suckers off my tomato plants. So this isn't quite the same thing, but I'm trying to just clear the path here in the middle,
exactly.
Right?
Everything from this wire down, and the easiest way to do it is kind of grip it with your thumb and just snap down.
So I'm not even pulling from I'm just pulling from the leaf.
Yep. Got it. It'll come with the whole
Got it. I see.
petiole and everything.
So I don't need to go right to the stem. I just need to. Oh yeah, look at that. That's a lot easier.
Yep. And when you get going, it's crazy. People, you'll see my guys will be doing about 30 vines in a minute, and they're just moving through here. But
stop showing off.
No, you're doing good.
I'm just trying to say thank you. My unskilled labor here, I'm excellent. There we go. Even though your guys are skilled because they have to know what to pull.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I'm looking here, I'm thinking, holy jeez, I'm not pulling.
You can't put them back on, unfortunately.
I just pulled a sip of wine.
Right, yeah.
So these are self-pollinating. You said earlier you don't need bees.
Right, we don't. So they have both male and female parts basically contained in the same flower. And so you can see here the little flower, there's pollen on that. It's going to basically pollinate itself, and then each of these little flower capsules will turn into an individual grape. And they start out really tiny like that. And then basically for the next month, the grapes will expand in size until they get to full size. They'll still be green, but they'll expand. And then basically like in mid-July, they start to turn color and they start to ripen, and the sugar content comes up. And hopefully next time you guys come out, we'll see some grapes on the vines here, and we can go through that kind of whole process.
What bugs do you need?
We like most bugs out here. That's one of the nice things about growing grapes in this area is we don't have a lot of insect problems.
That's
so
good.
Really the only things I have to deal with are things like Japanese beetles, which everybody has to deal with.
Yeah.
But they come July 1st every year, and so we kind of know they're coming.
For the holiday weekend.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's one other bug called grape berry moth. So it's actually a moth. They lay eggs inside the grapes, and then like a little caterpillar basically eats its way out. So one of the things that's nice is they don't like sunlight. So that's another thing we do to expose this like that. They like to kind of hide in these leaves in here, and it's more protected. So when we have a clean fruiting zone like this, they don't really like that. So that's one of the reasons we're doing this as well.
And that's so that's great. So you don't have to again intervene as often or as much because of your growing conditions.
We definitely try to work with nature in that. We have some good bugs out here too. Ladybugs are always a good thing. There's they eat the aphids and all the other little kind of creatures that are out here. So we definitely try to be as little manipulative as we can. But.
Right. And except for everything that you do by hand.
Yes, well, yeah.
Everything.
Exactly. Yeah. And then another thing we're doing this time of year is we're doing what's called a tissue sample. So we want to make sure that as the vine approaches its sort of fruit set stage, it has all the little nutrients that it needs. And so we're basically going to take a sample of these leaves. We'll send them to a lab, they chop them up, make them into basically a solution, and they test them for things like nitrogen and potassium and boron and all these little micronutrients. And then if we find that there's something that's missing, like maybe the vine needs a little calcium or a little magnesium, we can actually just come out and hit the vines with them so that we're not spraying fertilizers just ad nauseum. We're basically giving the vine exactly what it needs.
What it needs, right. So, so where do you send them to?
We send them to a lab. We send them to Cornell just because I have connections
why
there.
not?
Yeah, but you know, any of the state schools, Rutgers, Penn State, they all have basically labs that will work with farmers and basically figure out, you know, that kind of stuff, do tissue analysis.
And you've got your own lab, so to speak. I mean, are you able to do any sort of
I don't have the equipment to do this kind of stuff.
To go that deep, but you could do other analysis too when you need to, which is nice.
We do mostly wine analysis, and then this is really the one thing we do. We do a soil sample, and we do a leaf sample, send them into a lab. So do that in every block every year so that we know.
Just once a year?
Yep, once a year pretty much. And so when we're doing that, we want to take a sample of basically the youngest fully formed leaf. So the thought process here is that the younger the leaf, the more reflective it is of sort of where the vine is right now. But if it's not fully formed, it's not going to have all the nutrients it needs. So that's not going to be a good way to analyze. So we'll kind of start from the top and work our way down until we get to a leaf like this that's fully formed.
Yep.
And we're just going to snap that
not
off.
just bigger, but it's got deeper color and all too.
Deeper color, but you can actually see like these are missing something. So you see how they're dark green in the center.
Yes, and they're not
and
quite
a little bit lighter on the end.
Yep.
So I could tell that these are missing something. I got a feeling it's magnesium because this block always needs a little magnesium. But we're going to check that first, and then if we need a little bit of something, we can hit them with that. So we're just going to go through and pick some samples here. We'll put them in a bag and we'll send them out.
Here we are standing right in the middle of your art installation.
Right.
It fits in very nicely with your Maplewood lifestyle.
Yeah, exactly.
And so we're right here in the middle. This is a 2-acre plot. This is to give people an idea. I mean, this is what 2 acres looks like. And this is
Riesling. Yeah, so we got about 3,000 new Riesling vines we planted last month here.
So we're here right at the beginning of spring. It was dirt.
Right.
Ready to prep. The poles, I think, are in, right?
Yeah, and the poles go in first, so we do that in the summer before. And then the next thing we do is we have augers, kind of like what you use to drill if you go ice fishing.
Yep.
Looks like that. And so we dig the holes first. So between this and the Pinot Noir, we dug about 5,000 holes. So once you do that, then we come back basically a couple days later and start planting everything. So the vines just look like sticks basically with roots on them at that point. They got a couple buds on the top. We dig about 2 feet deep to give the roots kind of nice room to grow down. We put the vine in, cover it back up, pack it in, and then each of the vines gets one of these grow tubes. So as they're young, you want a kind of a way to get them to grow up straight and get protected so they don't get hit by the mower or anything.
And so they've already grown a good foot and a half,
yeah,
right?
So I mean, we put in one of these, it's called a pencil rod. It's basically just a stake to help the vine grow up that. We put on a grow tube, and then you can see, these started as 2 buds, and they're growing up nice now. So these are going to kind of wrap themselves around this pole. By the end of the year, we'll get it up out of the grow tubes. You can see them peeking out of the grow tubes already.
Yeah.
And we'll kind of lay them down across this wire. And then at one point, probably like in August, we'll come through and put in the remaining wires here and sort of give it a way to flush itself out.
Now the grow tubes actually obviously protect them because they're young, and I mean critters could probably come through here. And,
critters or the mower or anything.
But they actually they provide some added heat too to help
they
growing.
It helps the microclimate a little bit. It protects it from things like wind and so we basically try to do grow tubes on everything right away, because you can see putting it back over a vine is not the easiest thing, but getting it right away, it protects it from everything, and then we can come in and manage weeds and stuff like that in here.
Just planted.
Yep.
And we talked last time about the business plan, the business model of trying to figure out, when to plant, what to plant, when to order, because you ordered these a couple of years ago. You said the rootstock.
We ordered these 2 years ago.
It is 2018. When will you start producing fruit to make wine from this plot?
Yeah, so usually in their 3rd year, they'll start to produce a small crop of fruit.
Okay.
In their 4th year, there'll be a full harvest.
Gotcha.
So we got at least another 2 or 3 years before we get any fruit out of this.
Yeah.
Luckily, Riesling is a little bit easier to make in terms of time. It takes about a year to make that wine.
Good.
So we'll be drinking wine from this block in about 4 years.
Okay. The Pinot's going to take a little longer.
Pinot's going to take, Pinot takes 3 years to make, basically 2 years in oak and then a year in the bottle.
Yep. Yeah.
But we're getting ahead of everything now. We know that we're projecting basically what we're going to be selling in 3 or 4 years. So we're really excited about this block. The vines have been doing really well in the first couple of weeks here, so that's a good sign. It's not like
So I'm looking out over here, and I can see in some rows the vines are actually up above the tubes.
Yeah.
So is that giving you an early indication of maybe how this land is going to sort of produce?
Yeah,
or where you're
I mean, not yet at this point. It's not like
a little too soon to tell.
A lot of times if you have like more water in one spot, you'll see a little bit more growth in that spot.
Gotcha.
It's a little bit inconsistent here so far, so I haven't noticed any general patterns, but we're definitely looking at that stuff early on.
Okay.
Just because stuff like, the block that's above that, our Blaufränkisch, that one corner of it tends to get a little bit more water just because it's located on the hill. So I make the rosé from that side, and then I make the red from the drier side. So we are kind of looking at that even within a block.
Interesting.
How things are.
And the grass wasn't here when we were here last time too, right?
No.
So that's all.
So we kind of rip up everything here when we're augering and planting, and so we wait, and then after we're done planting, we come through and rake this all out, make it smooth, and we plant grass. And then it takes a couple of weeks for everything to come up. But yeah, the grass is really important too. It also helps prevent soil erosion.
Right,
so if this was bare ground, every time it rains, this would all wash out. So this kind of roots everything in.
Moderates temperature.
Moderates temperature a little bit. It helps beneficial insects live in here, and it also helps compete with the vines for water a little bit. So the grass, as you know, you got to water your grass at home when it's dry in the summer.
Yeah.
They use a lot of water, and so when we have some rains, the grass basically pulls most of it and just leaves what we need basically for the vines.
Cool.
Yeah.
Who mows the grass?
I do.
You just want to get away every now and then? You're like,
well,
I'm taking the mower out.
No, it's actually really important for me to do that because it allows me to travel every row every week. So that's really my best way of scouting because I'm not just mowing blindly. Sometimes I got an audiobook on or something, but I'm really looking at each row and saying, all right, if there's a problem here, let's get on that right away. So that's a way for me to basically check every vine every week. No, and it's really important for me to be out here. I mean, it's my responsibility, these things, and there's 20,000 vines out here. So luckily, we're basically done in the winery for the summer. So we've bottled all of our wines that we're going to bottle this year. So I'm literally out here 5 or 6 days a week and then in the tasting room the rest of the time. So I get to spend time doing things like mowing and, working with the guys. And we have some new people on the crew, so I always try to go out in the morning and kind of show them what we're doing, explain why we're doing it, because they always do a better job if they know why we're doing it.
A couple questions popped into mind on the drive out here. One again, as we talked about earlier, follow you on social media, and you follow me, and those great vacation pictures of Greece and Sicily. It was great. It was great. That's why the pictures were great.
It's funny. We were traveling with a friend who's a professional photographer, so I said, this is the first trip I've taken where the pictures were actually as good as the vacation. I felt like.
But so you're in Greece and Sicily. You're never going to grow grapes that are being grown on Santorini or on Mount Etna. And as much as you probably would have loved to after tasting them to be able to do something like that, what do you, besides having a blast, having an amazing time, what do you take away professionally from a trip like that?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, we're never going to grow those grape varieties, but we're still growing grapes. And so it would be like two apple growers meeting. They might be growing different varieties, but they're still growing apples. So there's techniques that they're doing there that I'm not saying we're going to change everything we're doing, but it gives me an idea of ways that they're doing it in other places in the world. And it's kind of just like another tool for the tool belt, the way I think about it. So the broader your experiences are in grape growing, the more sort of options you have. And it's the same thing with winemaking. I mean, I'm not making a Sirtico or Nerello Cappuccio, but we're all making wine. And so when I go over there and I'm meeting with winemakers, we're talking about technical things. We're talking about yeast varieties. We're talking about fermentation temperature and oak selection. And so a lot of those things are really relevant to what we're doing here in the winery.
Anything you saw there reinforced what you're doing here?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like anytime I go to a place, I always try to visit the extremes. Like I try to visit the most hippie biodynamic producers, and then I try to visit the most commercially successful sort of progressive producers, because I always find that like we're somewhere in the middle. But if I'm going to people that are in the middle, I'm not getting new ideas. You have to kind of explore the fringes to understand what's out there in terms of ideas. And so really even just talking philosophy about winemaking or wine or grape growing with other growers, I don't want to say it's inspiring, but it inspires you to think in different ways and kind of open your eyes to different thought processes. Anything
really blow you away about Sicily or about Greece?
The wine and food.
Yeah, and that's the thing too.
Yeah.
So this is something I know you do. I mean, in Europe, it's a given. The wine is being made to go with food.
For sure.
And that's your focus. It's not necessarily an American winemaking focus throughout the entire industry, state by state.
Yeah, and even more so than that, it's the wine that they're growing is made for the food that they're growing.
Right.
It's not like they're just making food-friendly wines. They're making a Sirtico because it's delicious with sardines.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And so they're making
what grows
things
together goes together.
Exactly.
And it's not even a theme. It's just
that's just life.
Centuries of life.
It's just life.
Yeah.
So they have that concept down, and so I do try to expose myself to that. And so when I go somewhere and travel and have the opportunity to taste stuff like that, I try to sort of weave it into the bigger thought process of how do these people live? How do they? What's important to them? The cool thing about our industry is people like roll out the red carpet for you.
It's a social business.
It's a social business, but it's also like a mutual respect between people in this industry. So I can call a place like Sicily where I know nobody and set up a couple of meetings, and they'll spend the whole morning with you. They'll cook us lunch. They'll take us out in the vineyards, tours like this. So you get an experience. Right? Oh, they're amazing. That Nerosso is amazing, and the Assurtico from Santorini was equally as unbelievable.
Yeah, you really, I think you nailed two great wines that really typify place.
Yeah.
And as much as any wines out there in the world.
Well, the interesting thing that I thought was, I mean, they've been growing those grapes there for literally 1,000 years. Same varieties in the same places, and really, both of those regions haven't kind of come to the forefront until the last 10 years or 20 years.
And they've really burst out. And there's some great deals too. Because
the value's unbelievable, but it's cool to see an old wine region sort of re-emerging, because I feel like there's some parallels to what's happening here. We're a new wine region, but we're emerging, and so we had a lot of the same challenges in terms of marketing. And so we had a lot of stuff that we were talking about that we couldn't be further apart from each other, but we had a lot of the same challenges, I guess.
I used a Greek wine at an event a few years back, and someone looked at me and they said, Greek wine? And I said, I don't know. They've been making it for thousands of years.
Yeah.
Some of them do have it down pat by now.
Yeah, exactly. It's not all Retsina.
That's right. Pretty cool. Last question. Why do you do what you do?
Well, that's a good question. That's deep.
There's a lot of people, I know, I like to, sometimes we want to go a little deep. But it's, people, there's people are envious of what you do.
Yeah.
One of the things we've been pointing out these past 6 months is that it's not all glitz and glamour.
Sure.
In fact, most of it's
That's
not.
hard work, definitely.
But why do you do what you do? You could have done a lot of other things.
Yeah, I could have, definitely. I think I knew from an early age I was not an office person. Like sitting at a computer desk 9 to 5 that has no appeal to me. So I didn't want to do that. I grew up in an agricultural family, so like farming something from the land always had an appeal to me. We grew up making wine, so we were home winemakers.
Right. Home winemakers, but
a barrel to a year, old school Italian, wine. And so my experience from wine from an early age was really positive. And I think it kind of just came together where we had this piece of land that we really weren't growing anything on. We were using a part of it for our garden center business, and had the opportunity to basically figure out what to grow here, and grapes made sense. It's a really good spot for grapes because of our hillsides and everything. And it kind of just came together. And I think my experience with wine in college, especially once I started learning about it, and you know this still, the more you learn about it, you just go down the rabbit hole, and it's like you just get more and more into it, and it's something that people that are in the wine industry for 50 years are still learning every day. That's really important to me, because I have a yearning for learning. Like, I like to learn new things and experience new things. So this is kind of an industry where you can continue to do that your whole life and have new experiences, and it's fun. It's a tangible thing for me, right? Like, so when you were here 2 months ago, the environment's totally changed.
Absolutely.
And so for me, it's a really seasonal thing, and you kind of get tied into the natural rhythm of things in this job, which I love. I love being outside.
And you feel the rhythm now. It's like a golf swing or playing basketball, right? You get the stroke, you get the right movement. It's different, but it's repetitive. It's familiar, but it's new. And so, but you've been at it now for a good handful of seasons.
Yeah, 10 years.
So you've got a rhythm now.
Yeah, and I remember like my first year, I wrote everything down. Like, I probably spent an hour at the end of every day, like writing everything down. And now so much of that stuff is
someday will be donated to the Cornell Agricultural School.
No, but I mean, now it's some of it's so intuitive because you know we've done it 10 times. We just know, and my crew does too. They know they're coming out.
Muscle memory.
Yes. Hey, buddy. So yeah, it gets a little easier every year, but it's still different enough where you know we have challenges every year and we have new things and kind of keeps us on our toes. So it's been fun.
All right, Michael, thanks a lot for having us here.
Thanks for coming.
Appreciate it, and taking some time out bright and early this morning, and it's starting to get bright now, which is great, right?
No.
It's hopefully the season
off.
really starts to take shape.
Right.
Yeah. Pretty nice. This is Hank Zona of the Grapes Unwrapped with Mike Beneduce of Beneduce Vineyards. We'll see you again soon, and as we continue our series here of a year in a winery and a year in the vineyard, and it's pretty interesting. People are enjoying it, I think, who are watching it, and it's you know, I think we're succeeding in showing people that it's not all glitz and glamour, but it's actually pretty cool stuff that's happening.
Definitely.
See you again next time.
Thanks.